right to work has nothing to do with rights or working. It has everything to do with preventing collective bargaining from happening effectively.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Joey Andrews is the Democratic state representative for Michigan's 38th district. He is also a former policy analyst for the Michigan AFL. Joey, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, before, obviously, I think people can kind of guess the reason that we wanted to talk to you is that there have been some huge wins for labor in Michigan. You recently repealed right to work, quote unquote, and you reinstituted prevailing wage. But, before we get to that, can you speak a little bit to your own background and why you have seen unions as being so important? It's not something that being a lawyer, right? Not too many lawyers are going to go work for the AFL, and it's certainly not where you're going to make the big bucks, right? So, there's obviously some sort of belief there in the power of unions. Just talk to us about that.
Yeah, so a lot of it is family. The major one is my grandfather on my mom's side. So my grandparents were immigrants that came over from Germany at the end of World War II. And after my grandfather got here, he joined the Carpenters Union in Michigan, worked as a union carpenter for 30, 40 years almost, I think. It allowed my grandmother, who spoke kind of broken English at best, to be a stay-at-home mom, raise 4 kids, bought a house that he improved himself as a carpenter. And then there was a tragedy that happened in the mid 80s, a little before I was born. He, as a result of an on-the-job accident that he had a few years prior, he had a brain aneurysm, died suddenly. Leaving my grandmother, who hadn't really, aside from some, side work as a seamstress, had never worked a day in her life, with, a house that was virtually an empty nest at this point. And his union benefits helped her keep her house and continue to live the life that she had enjoyed. And without his union, I think there's every possibility that probability that she would have struggled to keep the house, that it would have completely disrupted our entire family. And so, for me, that has been kind of fundamental in how I view the labor movement and, what labor does for working people.
Talk to us about your work as a policy analyst for the AFL. What is that? What did you do specifically?
Yeah, so I started my time at the AFL as an organizer before getting into the policy department. Okay. Fun fact, in the 2020 cycle, I was working for the Michigan Democratic Party, and myself and a couple other organizers unionized the coordinated campaign in the state. And that experience is really what drove me to work for labor, because I got to see firsthand that the party doesn't always live its values. The minute we announced our card signing campaign, they just went into like full-blown union busting mode.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, rats in the ranks, and then they made contract negotiations take 2 months. We were almost to October before we even had a contract. And then all the things, classic thing, right? All the things they told us they couldn't afford in the contract, at the end of the campaign, they just gave us. They couldn't put healthcare through the end of the year in the contract, too much money. But then once the campaign was over, they were like, yeah, you guys can have another month of healthcare, but it's not in the contract.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, so I went to work at the AFL after that, did some organizing work for them before moving to the policy side. And a lot of what I did there was look at under what, the time was our right to work framework and some other really unfriendly labor laws that we had, ways that we could empower local municipalities and, try to level the field as best we could with so many of these unfair laws on the books. So I got to spend a lot of time with all of these, little attacks on labor that the Republicans had passed for decades.
And, you were ended up being successful during this legislative session. And so let's talk about those two in particular, and then we can go to any other wins that may have been as not as heavily reported on, but I know that those are two really important ones. And that's first is the repeal of right to work. And this, talk to us about right to work. How do you see people's reaction to when they hear right to work and their conception of it?
Yeah, I mean, right to work has got to be one of the best messaging campaigns that the right has ever come up with. As you guys are well aware, right to work has nothing to do with rights or working. It has everything to do with preventing collective bargaining from happening effectively. We always used to nickname it right to freeload, which I think is more descriptive of what it actually does. And I think that's a messaging battle we've had to fight. But I have personally found a lot of success that once you explain to somebody that all right to work does is enable people to benefit from the collective bargaining of the union and the benefits that it's achieving without having to pay for it, I think it really triggers a lot of people's fundamental fairness feelings at that point. I mean, I've talked to a lot of Republicans who are at a baseline anti-union, but you explain to them what right to work does, and their reaction is immediately, well, that's not fair. Yeah.
And I think that for me, there's obviously that fairness bit of it, but for me, one of the most hypocritical things about the right to work and the crown that it's coming from is that, this is supposedly, ostensibly, a, small government type of folks that this right to work legislation typically comes from. And they're the type of people that are always going to be the ones opposing any safety regulations, any at all, limitations on the contractual authority of the employers. And what right to work actually does mechanically is it goes in between the union, the workers, and the employer and say, this is a contract provision by law that you can't agree to, right? Because in collective bargaining states, nobody from the government is saying you have to agree to a security clause, you have to agree to a, fair pay, fair representation clause. Nobody says that from the state. That's something that the workers and the employer agree to voluntarily, right? But but in right to work states, the government comes in and says, no, you can't do that. That's against the law. It's really, really bizarre.
We have several other laws like that on the books, and it's all the same sort of thing. The party of small and local government until it's a local government's ability to set wages, until it's a local government's ability to set a prevailing wage, until it's the local government's ability to require paid family leave. It's a very hypocritical stance to take, I think, for just given what ostensibly they're saying their ideology is.
We've had exactly the same thing happen in Alabama. We had a Raise the Wage campaign that was going successfully in Huntsville, particularly picking up steam after Birmingham passed a higher minimum wage than the states. And then the legislature came in and shot it down and said, nope, that's illegal. You can't govern what happens in your city limits. Really, really terrible stuff. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.